I'm Georgia Hartwell, and 5 years ago, my parents cut me off over a lie my sister told, a lie so convincing they blocked my number, returned my letters unopened, and erased me like I'd never been born. They missed my medical school graduation, my wedding, every milestone that proved I was still standing while they were busy believing I'd fallen apart. I couldn't believe my own family would choose someone else's story over my documented truth. The betrayal wasn't just painful. It was surgical, deliberate, designed to destroy me. And for 5 years, I built a life without them, became one of the youngest attending trauma surgeons at Boston Memorial, and stopped waiting for them to realize they were wrong. Then one night, my pager went off in the ER. The incoming critical patient was bleeding out, unconscious, dying. It was Vanessa, my sister, the one who'd lied about everything. And I was the only surgeon in the building who could save her life. What happened next? I had to choose between my oath and my anger, between justice and revenge, between who I'd been raised to be and who I'd become without them. The truth they'd refused to see for half a decade was about to be exposed in the worst place possible. And the shocking part? I wasn't sure if saving her life would feel like mercy or the cruelest karma of all. I'm Georgia Hartwell, 32 years old, and 5 years ago my parents erased me like I never existed. One phone call, 4 minutes and 18 seconds long, and I became nobody's daughter. The betrayal didn't come from strangers. It came from the two people who were supposed to believe me no matter what. My sister Vanessa told them I'd dropped out of medical school, that I was spiraling into chaos, that I was a failure who couldn't handle the pressure. And they believed her without asking me a single question. I couldn't believe it when my mom's number started going straight to voicemail. Then my dad's. Then I realized they'd blocked me. Completely. Deliberately. Like cutting off a diseased limb. I sent emails with official documents from the university, letters explaining everything, even FedEx packages with proof that I was still enrolled, still standing, still their daughter. Every single one came back unopened, marked, "Return to sender." The humiliation of begging your own parents to see the truth is something that carves itself into your bones. Vanessa's lie wasn't just words. It was a weapon designed for maximum destruction. She told them I'd abandoned my dreams, that I was living somewhere they couldn't reach me, probably on someone's couch or worse. The infidelity wasn't romantic. It was familial. She cheated me out of my own story, my own voice, my own existence in their eyes. And the shocking part? They wanted to believe her. It was easier than confronting the fact that they'd chosen sides long before this ever happened. For 5 years, I was a ghost. No birthday calls, no Christmas cards, nothing. They didn't come to my medical school graduation. I walked across that stage with Dr. Maggie Thornton cheering from the audience because she'd become more of a mother than mine ever was. They didn't attend my wedding to Ethan, a human rights attorney who saw my worth when my own blood refused to. The karma I believed in felt like a myth, and the justice I craved seemed like something only other people received. But here's what they didn't know while they were writing me off. I was building an empire of self-worth they couldn't touch. I finished my residency at the top of my program, became an attending trauma surgeon at Boston Memorial at 31, one of the youngest in the hospital's history, published research that changed protocols across 3 states. I reclaimed every piece of dignity Vanessa tried to steal, brick by brick, surgery by surgery. And I did it with a chosen family that actually showed up. Maggie, Ethan, my best friend's memory pushing me forward even after cancer took her. The lie Vanessa told became the foundation of everything I built without them. She thought she was burying me, but she was actually giving me the freedom to become someone they could never control again. The family drama she created, the backstabbed feeling that haunted my early mornings, it all became fuel. And I had no idea that one night in the ER, 5 years of silence would collide with 5 seconds of recognition that would shatter everything Vanessa had constructed. Growing up, there were always 2 versions of reality in our house. The one Vanessa starred in, and the one I disappeared into. She was the golden child, the sun everyone orbited around, and I was the shadow they stepped over on their way to applaud her. When I got accepted into Johns Hopkins, my mother said, "That's nice," and went back to planning Vanessa's graduation party from a state school. When Vanessa got a B-, it was celebrated like a Nobel Prize. The pattern was so old, it had roots deeper than I could dig. I remember being 14, winning a regional science competition, coming home with the trophy still warm in my hands. My dad glanced at it, said, "Good job, Becca," and immediately turned to Vanessa to ask about her day. She'd gotten detention for skipping class, but somehow the conversation became about how the teacher didn't understand her creative spirit. I learned early that my achievements were footnotes in the biography of Vanessa's importance. The family betrayal wasn't loud. It was quiet, constant, suffocating. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every normal Tuesday, the script was the same. Vanessa's stories were gospel. Mine were met with half-listening nods. When she said she saw me smoking behind the gym in 10th grade, a complete lie, my parents grounded me for a month without asking if it was true. When I tried to tell them she'd stolen money from my college fund to buy concert tickets, I was told I was jealous and trying to cause drama. The truth was whatever Vanessa said it was, and I was just the narrator nobody wanted to hear from. The shocking part is how normalized it all became. I stopped trying to compete for their attention around age 16. I poured everything into school, into becoming someone who didn't need their validation to feel real. But that survival strategy also made me easier to cut off later. They'd already practiced not seeing me for years. Vanessa knew exactly which emotional buttons to push because she'd installed them herself, one dismissive family dinner at a time. My parents weren't monsters. They were just people who'd chosen their favorite and stuck with that story so long they couldn't see anything else. Vanessa was charming, loud, good at playing the victim when she needed sympathy. I was quiet, independent, the one who didn't need help. So when she painted me as the chaotic failure and herself as the concerned sister, it fit the narrative they'd been telling themselves my whole life. Maybe somewhere deep down, she was terrified of losing her place as the only one they saw. But you can't force people to wake up from a story they love more than they love you. So I stopped trying. And maybe that's why, when everything fell apart 5 years ago, I wasn't even surprised. I was devastated, humiliated, shamed, but not surprised. The lie Vanessa told was just the loudest version of a song they'd been humming my entire childhood. What I didn't know yet was that the biggest betrayal was still loading, disguised as concern. Her name was Sarah Chen, and she was the first person who ever made me feel like I wasn't asking for too much by simply existing. We met during my second year of med school, bonding over terrible cafeteria coffee and the shared understanding that we were both fighting to prove something to families who'd already written us off. She became my anchor, my mirror, the sister I should have had. And when she called me in November 2019 with a trembling voice and said, "It's stage 4, my world stopped spinning. The doctors gave her 6 months, maybe 8, with aggressive treatment. Sarah didn't have family nearby. Her parents had passed years before, and her brother was deployed overseas. So I made a choice that felt like breathing. I took a documented leave of absence from school to be her caregiver, her advocate, her family. I filed every form, got every signature, made sure the university knew exactly where I was and why. This wasn't chaos. This was love in its most deliberate form. But Vanessa saw an opportunity where I saw heartbreak. While I was holding Sarah's hand through chemo sessions that left her too weak to stand, while I was learning how to change IV bags and advocating with hospice nurses, Vanessa was on the phone with our parents. She told them I'd cracked under the pressure of medical school, that I'd abandoned my education, stopped answering her calls, was spiraling into something dark and unreachable. She weaponized my compassion and turned it into proof of failure. I couldn't believe someone could twist something so pure into ammunition. Sarah needed me. Actually needed me, not as a prop or a supporting character, but as a lifeline. And I was honored to be that for her. Every morning I woke up in that small hospice room, Every night I fell asleep holding her hand. I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The self-worth I'd built didn't come from my parents' approval anymore. It came from showing up for someone who saw my value. Sarah died on a Tuesday in March 2020, before the pandemic became real to most people, before we understood what was coming. I held her through her last breath, told her she was loved, promised I'd finish what we'd both started. The payback I wanted wasn't revenge on Vanessa yet. It was honoring Sarah by going back, by graduating, by becoming the doctor we'd both dreamed I'd be. But I had no idea that while I was grieving, Vanessa was already building the architecture of a lie so big it would cost me my entire family. When I returned to school 2 weeks after Sarah's funeral, emotionally shattered but academically cleared, I tried calling my parents to tell them I was back on track. The calls wouldn't go through. The emails bounced. And that's when I realized Vanessa had already convinced them I was gone, and my grief had given her the perfect window to make it permanent. The betrayal wasn't just the lie, it was the timing, the cruelty, the way she used my best friend's death as the final piece of evidence that I'd failed. The silence was surgical. Clean, complete, devastating. I sent my mom an email with my leave of absence approval letter attached, the registrar's signature right there in digital ink. I included Sarah's obituary, my re-enrollment confirmation, even a letter from my academic advisor confirming I was in good standing. 63 words asking them to please just look at the truth. The email sat in my sent folder like a gravestone. Delivered, never opened, never acknowledged. I tried my dad next. A physical letter, certified mail, every piece of documentation proving I hadn't dropped out, hadn't disappeared, hadn't become the catastrophe Vanessa described. It came back 2 weeks later, unopened, with refused, stamped across the front in red ink. That word, refused, felt like a second funeral. They didn't want the truth. They wanted the story they'd already committed to. And Vanessa made sure that story stayed locked in place. My Aunt Ruth called me once, about 3 months into the silence. She'd heard through the family grapevine that I was struggling, that I'd left school, that maybe I was in trouble. I broke down and told her everything. The leave of absence, Sarah's death, the documents I'd sent, the walls my parents had built. She listened, said she believed me, promised she'd talk to them. 2 days later, she called back and said, "Georgia, they won't hear it. Your mother said Vanessa wouldn't lie about something this serious?" The humiliation of that moment lives in my chest like scar tissue. Vanessa wouldn't lie about something this serious. But she had. She'd lied with precision, with confidence, with the kind of conviction that comes from a lifetime of being believed without question. And my parents chose her certainty over my documented proof because belief isn't about evidence. It's about who you've already decided to trust. I was backstabbed by my own blood, and they called it choosing not to enable me. Pride became their fortress. Admitting they were wrong would mean admitting they'd abandoned their daughter over a lie, that they'd missed years of her life because they didn't bother to verify a single claim. So instead they dug in. They stopped asking questions. They let Vanessa control the narrative while I sent voicemail after voicemail that went straight to a full inbox, like screaming into a void that had already sealed itself shut. So I made a decision. If they wanted me gone, I'd be gone. But on my terms. I stopped sending emails, stopped calling, stopped hoping they'd wake up one day and choose me. I redirected every ounce of that energy into rebuilding a life they'd never touch again. And while they were comfortable in their silence, I was becoming someone they wouldn't recognize. Someone who didn't need their validation to know her worth. Someone who was about to show them what real dignity looked like. After Sarah's funeral, I went back to med school with a grief so heavy I could barely stand under it, but I stood anyway. I worked like my life depended on it, because emotionally, it did. Every exam I aced, every clinical rotation I dominated, every patient I helped save was a brick in the wall between me and the people who'd decided I wasn't worth the effort of a phone call. I graduated top 15% of my class, matched into a competitive trauma surgery residency in Boston, and never looked back. Dr. Maggie Thornton became the mother I needed when mine decided to believe a lie over her own daughter. Maggie was the chief of surgery at Boston Memorial, a woman who built her career in a field that tried to crush her at every turn, and she saw something in me worth mentoring. She didn't ask about my family. She asked about my skills, my goals, my fire. And when I finally told her the whole story one night after a brutal 72-hour shift, she just nodded and said, "Then we build you a family that shows up." And we did. Ethan came into my life during my 3rd year of residency, a human rights attorney with a quiet strength and a spine made of steel. He didn't flinch when I told him about the 5-year silence, about the parents who chose a lie over their daughter. He just held my hand and said, "Their loss is my gain." We got married on a Saturday in April, small ceremony. Just people who actually loved us. Maggie walked me down the aisle. My parents didn't even know it happened. I became an attending trauma surgeon at 31, one of the youngest in the hospital's history. Published research on blunt force abdominal trauma that changed protocols in emergency rooms across the Northeast. Built a reputation for being brilliant under pressure, unshakable in crisis, the surgeon you wanted when everything was falling apart. The karma I'd stopped believing in started to feel like something I'd created myself, not divine justice, but the kind you build with your own hands. But Vanessa couldn't let it go. Over those 5 years, I heard through distant cousins and old family friends that she was still maintaining the story. Told people I was probably homeless or in and out of rehab, or that she'd tried to help, but I wouldn't accept it. She even called the medical board once, I found out later, trying to verify my credentials, like she was hoping to catch me in some imaginary fraud. The family drama she'd created had become her full-time job. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I didn't need their belief anymore. I had Maggie, Ethan, a career I'd bled for, and a life built on truth instead of performance. I'd reclaimed every piece of dignity Vanessa tried to steal, and I genuinely thought I'd never see them again, that I'd closed that chapter and locked it in a drawer I'd never open. Then my pager went off on a random Thursday night in October, and the name on the incoming trauma alert made my blood turn to ice. The ER was chaos. 2 nurses sprinting past me, residents shouting updates, the smell of disinfectant and copper in the air. I was lead trauma surgeon on call, which meant every critical case that rolled through those doors was mine to manage. My pager had gone off at 11:47 p.m. Female, 29, MVA, severe internal bleeding, unconscious, ETA 3 minutes. I was already gloved up, ready to move, when the paramedics burst through the doors with the gurney. And then I saw her face. Vanessa. Pale, bloodied, unconscious, with a breathing tube down her throat and her pressure dropping fast. For 5 seconds, I forgot how to breathe. This was the woman who'd erased me from our parents' lives, who'd turned my compassion into a weapon, who'd spent half a decade maintaining a lie so convincing it became family gospel. And now she was dying on my table, and I was the only surgeon in the building qualified to save her. The universe has a sick sense of humor sometimes. Or maybe it's karma, real karma, not the sanitized version people post on Instagram. Here was my revenge, handed to me on a silver platter without me even asking for it. I could walk away, cite conflict of interest, let another surgeon handle it, and no one would question it. She'd stolen my family. I could let fate take hers. The justice would be poetic, clean, and completely defensible. But that's not who I am. That's not who Sarah taught me to be, or who Maggie raised me to be, or who I fought like hell to become when everyone else gave up on me. I looked at the ER attending and said, "I have a conflict of interest. This is my sister. I'm disclosing it now, but I'm also the most qualified person to operate, and she doesn't have time to wait." He nodded, made the call. Time mattered more than optics. I moved. The surgery took 4 hours. Ruptured spleen, liver laceration, internal bleeding that should have killed her before she reached us. My hands didn't shake. My focus didn't waver. I operated on Vanessa like she was any other patient because my oath was bigger than my anger, and my professionalism was stronger than my pain. Every suture I placed, every bleed I controlled, every decision I made, it was all about saving a life, not settling a score. When I finally closed her up and walked out of that OR, I was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the surgery. I'd just saved the person who'd destroyed me, and I had no idea what that meant or what came next. But as I pushed through the doors into the waiting room to give the family update, I saw them, my mother and father, sitting in those terrible plastic chairs, looking 5 years older and 1,000 times smaller. And when my mom looked up and saw my face, saw the badge clipped to my scrub top that read, Dr. Georgia Hartwell, attending trauma surgeon, everything stopped. My mother's hand flew to her mouth like she'd been slapped. My father stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor, the sound sharp enough to cut through the ambient noise of the waiting room. They stared at me, not at the scrubs, not at the surgical cap still on my head, but at the badge, the name, the title, 5 years of certainty collapsing in real time, right there under the fluorescent lights that made everyone look half dead. I didn't say anything at first. What do you say to people who chose to believe you'd failed without ever asking if it was true? I stood there in my blood-speckled scrubs, the evidence of my competence literally written across my body, and watched them try to reconcile the daughter they'd discarded with the surgeon who'd just saved their other daughter's life. The truth doesn't need a microphone when it's standing right in front of you, breathing and undeniable. Vanessa's stable, I said, my voice clinical, detached. Ruptured spleen, grade 3 liver lac, significant internal bleeding. She's critical but alive. We'll monitor her in the ICU for the next 48 hours. I delivered it like a weather report because anything else would have cracked me open, and I couldn't afford to break in front of them. Not here. Not after everything. My mom started crying, silent, shaking sobs that might have moved me once, but now just felt like noise. Georgia, my dad started, but I held up my hand. Not rudely, just firmly. I'll update you every 4 hours per protocol. If you have questions about her care, you can page me through the nurses' station. I turned to leave because staying meant opening a door I wasn't sure I wanted to walk through. But then my dad said, "We didn't know." And I stopped. Didn't turn around, just stopped. "You didn't want to know," I said, still facing the hallway. "There's a difference." And then I walked away, because the payback I'd fantasized about for 5 years, the moment they'd realize what they'd done, felt nothing like I'd imagined. It didn't feel victorious. It felt hollow and sad and infuriating all at once. They'd seen my name on a badge and suddenly I was real again, like I'd needed their witnessing to exist. But the night wasn't done twisting the knife. About an hour later, while I was updating Vanessa's chart in the ICU, Aunt Ruth appeared in the doorway. The same aunt who'd tried to help years ago and couldn't break through, but she'd never stopped watching, never stopped gathering proof. She was holding her phone, and her face was the kind of angry that comes from finally seeing something you should have seen years ago. "We need to talk," she said. "And you need to see what I found." Aunt Ruth didn't waste time. She sat down across from me in the tiny ICU consultation room and opened her phone like she was presenting evidence in a trial. "I've been watching this family lie to themselves for 5 years," she said, her voice low and furious. "And I'm done being quiet." She turned the screen toward me, and what I saw made my stomach drop. Screenshots, dozens of them. Messages between Vanessa and our parents, dated across the last 5 years. The receipts were devastating. Vanessa had actively blocked the truth at every turn. In one message thread from 2020, my mom mentioned that I'd sent an email with some documents, and Vanessa replied, "Mom, she's probably faking those. I have a friend who works in admissions. I'll verify and get back to you." She never verified. She just came back 2 days later and said, "Confirmed. She's not enrolled. She's lying to cover her tracks." There were more. Screenshots of Vanessa telling my dad that I'd tried to contact her asking for money, probably for drugs. A message where she warned them that if I showed up at family events, it would be manipulative and they shouldn't engage. Even a conversation where my mom said she missed me and Vanessa responded with, "Missing someone who abandoned you is just codependency, Mom. You have to let her go." The infidelity of it, the betrayal, was so calculated it stopped feeling personal and started feeling pathological. This wasn't a single lie that spiraled. This was a sustained campaign of erasure. Vanessa hadn't just lied about me dropping out. She'd built an entire infrastructure to keep the lie alive, to prevent any crack in the story where truth might slip through. And my parents had let her, because it was easier than confronting the possibility that they'd been wrong. "I found these last week," Ruth said, her hands shaking slightly. "I've been trying to figure out how to tell you, or them, or anyone. And then I got the call tonight that Vanessa was in an accident, and I knew this was the moment everything had to come out." She looked at me with something like grief. "Georgia, I'm so sorry. I should have pushed harder. I should have made them listen. But the shocking part, the part that made me feel something other than rage, was that Ruth had tried. She'd been collecting evidence for months, trying to find the right way to detonate a bomb that would destroy the family's comfortable delusion. And now, with Vanessa unconscious 2 rooms away, and my parents sitting in the waiting room with their world crumbling, the truth was finally louder than the lie. The persona Vanessa had crafted, the concerned sister, the reliable daughter, was dying faster than her body had been an hour ago. And the karma everyone talks about? It was just the truth, finally given a stage. I sat with those screenshots for 20 minutes, just staring at proof of something I'd always known, but could never prove. The betrayal wasn't surprising. I'd lived it. But seeing it documented, archived, undeniable, that changed something. This wasn't he said she said anymore. This was Vanessa, in her own words, systematically destroying me because it served whatever narrative she needed to stay the golden child. Ruth and I walked back to the waiting room together. My parents were still there, looking smaller and older than I remembered, like the last 5 hours had aged them a decade. I didn't sit down. I stood in front of them, Ruth beside me, and I said, "We need to talk. And this time, you're going to listen." My dad opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "No, you don't get to speak yet. You lost that right when you returned my letters unopened." Ruth handed them her phone. "Read it," she said, her voice hard. "All of it. Every message, every lie, every time Vanessa convinced you to ignore your other daughter." And they did. I watched their faces change as they scrolled. Confusion, then shock, then something that looked like horror. My mom made a sound like she'd been punched. My dad just kept shaking his head, whispering, "No, no, no," like denial could rewrite the last 5 years. "She told us you were lying," my mom finally said, her voice breaking. She said she had proof, and that's when I felt it. Not victory, not vindication, just exhaustion. "She showed you what she wanted you to see," I said. "And you believed her because it was easier than believing you might have been wrong about me my entire life. The justice I'd wanted for so long wasn't clean. It wasn't satisfying. It was messy and painful and complicated, because they weren't villains. They were just people who'd failed me in the most fundamental way parents can fail a child. They'd chosen comfort over truth. And now they were sitting in a hospital waiting room realizing that the daughter they'd erased had just saved the daughter who'd lied to them for half a decade. "I don't know what happens next," I told them, and I meant it. "I don't know if there's a version of this where we come back from what you did. But if there is, it doesn't start with apologies. It starts with Vanessa telling the truth, in writing, to everyone she lied to. And it starts with you two going to therapy and figuring out why you were so ready to believe I'd failed." I looked at Ruth, then back at them. "I'm not the one who needs to prove myself anymore. That's your job now." And then I left them there, sitting with the wreckage of a lie that had held our family hostage for 5 years, while I went back to do my job, checking on Vanessa, updating her vitals, making sure the person who'd tried to erase me would live to face what she'd done. The revenge I'd imagined was never going to feel how I thought it would. But reclaiming my dignity? That felt exactly right. 3 months later, I'm standing in my kitchen, looking at 4 plates on the table. It's Sunday, and Ethan is making coffee, humming something off-key while sunlight cuts through the window. We're expecting guests, my parents, for the first time since everything exploded in that hospital waiting room. This isn't a fairy tale ending. This is something slower, more fragile, built on conditions I set and boundaries I enforce, Vanessa confessed. In writing, like I demanded. An email sent to every family member, every friend she'd lied to, every person who'd been told I was a failure or worse. She didn't apologize, not really, but she admitted the truth. And for people who'd believed her gospel for 5 years, that was earthquake enough. Some family members reached out. Some didn't. I'm learning that I don't need everyone's belief to stand in my truth. My parents started therapy, individually and together. They're trying, which is more than they did for half a decade but less than I deserved my whole life. We're rebuilding on my terms, structured visits, honest conversations, and zero tolerance for the kind of gaslighting that made me invisible for so long. It's uncomfortable and awkward, and sometimes I still want to scream at them for all the years they stole from us. But I'm choosing to let myself be someone's daughter again, slowly, carefully, with one hand always on the door. Vanessa and I don't speak. Maybe we will someday, maybe we won't. Right now, she's living with the social death of being exposed as a liar, and I'm living with the reality that my sister tried to destroy me because she couldn't stand me succeeding outside her shadow. The family drama that defined my childhood is finally being named for what it was. Abuse disguised as sibling rivalry, neglect disguised as favoritism. Maggie tells me I'm allowed to be angry and hopeful at the same time, that healing isn't linear, and reconciliation doesn't erase harm. Ethan reminds me that I don't owe anyone access to my life just because we share DNA. And I'm learning that the real victory isn't them finally seeing me. It's me never needing them to see me in order to know my worth. So yeah, 4 plates on the table. It's not perfect and it's not forgiveness. It's containment. It's a door I'm choosing to crack open because the truth didn't expire just because they ignored it for 5 years. And maybe that's the point. Dignity isn't about revenge or making people pay. It's about standing in your truth so firmly that when they finally show up, you're not the one who has to bend. You're the one holding the door, deciding who gets to walk through. So that's my story, the lie that erased me, the truth that refused to die, and the night everything collided in an ER under fluorescent lights that don't lie. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you? Have you experienced family drama where the truth got buried under someone else's narrative? Drop a comment below and tell me, would you have walked away, or would you have saved her? What does real justice look like when revenge is handed to you and you have to decide if you're bigger than the pain? And here's the real question that keeps me up at night. Can you rebuild with people who broke you? Or is some betrayal too deep to ever truly heal? I'm still figuring that out myself, one Sunday dinner at a time. Your perspective might be the insight I didn't know I needed, so don't hold back. Tell me what you really think. If this story resonated with you, if it made you feel something or think differently about family, dignity, and what we owe the people who hurt us, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because I'm not done telling stories about reclaiming your worth, setting boundaries that actually hold, and navigating the messy, complicated truth that healing isn't always pretty, but it's always worth it. Let's keep this conversation going. I'll see you in the next one.